we've set. And I think in a few years we do it again, because now we have a benchmark, and it is, I think, very telling to say we are God's house in this area. We've got different names for different rooms of the house, but we are God's house and the witness in this city. And that sense of unity and impact should be continued to be celebrated. I agreed to be patron of Neighbour, and it's international, because it really struck me as unfortunate that we're often known for what we're against, not for what we're for. That we have given ourselves a bad rap and allowed the media often to frame us, and there is secular hostility that wants to frame us and point the finger, when the story and the experience is very different, totally different. I was with Steve and Donna Crouch. They came down and had a swim and dinner with us from Hillsong, and about 3-4 weeks ago. And Steve's international chair of Hillsong board, and as you know, Hillsong probably cop more than any of us at the moment in the media about their failures. They are a very big target. And I was quite struck when Steve and Donna both said, one of our mistakes is we have so focused on the Sunday worship and how amazing and how profound that a whole lot of the stuff we do Monday to Friday, no one in Australia even knows. For 15 years, they've been visiting Villawood Detention Centre with refugees. Many of the refugees coming to faith and now going to Hillsong, they've been caring and giving and serving, and their community services have absolutely no profile to offset some of the bad stories that they get targeted with. I was really struck by that. I've always been struck by what I think has been the mistaken theology of churches. So now I am going to swim out into dangerous rips and currents here. I think the church has lived with a mistaken theology far too long. The theology confuses good works with works of the law. And we have said, oh, grace and faith alone, that's the answer. It's not works. When Paul talks about the works of the law, that can't save us. He's talking about identity markers, circumcision and kosher food and obeying just the law of the Torah. And he's talking particularly to Jewish Christian leaders who don't want the Gentiles to actually be accepted. That's what the works of the law are. They're identity workers. It's not good works. We set up grace and faith as against good works. Now, we haven't been helped that dear Martin Luther, and I'm a fan, assumed when he was rightly fighting certain things in that time, indulgences or penance or purgatory or certain notions, that Paul, when he talked about the works of the law and its grace alone, was talking about indulgences and penance and purgatory. He wasn't. Martin Luther gave great biblical answers to medieval questions. They weren't Paul's questions. They weren't the works of the law that Paul was sending over against grace. Why do we know? Because Paul again and again talks about good works. Go and read it in Titus. Go and read it in Ephesians 2. By grace are you saved, by faith alone, verses 8 and 9. Why? Verse 10. So you may do the good works God has prepared beforehand for you to do. Grace has never been set up against good works. And we've often preached it as if somehow it's a bit suspicious. It's not really the gospel. It's an add-on. That's wrong theology. It's identity markers, and we know about identity politics today, don't we? It's identity markers of being Jewish that are the works of the law that grace is totally opposed to and demolishes. So I think in showing unashamedly some of the good works, not the works of the law, that churches are doing, and putting it into terms that people can understand in the community. This is a really profound benchmark. Now, I'm going to refer to McCrindle's latest research, Australia's Renewed Spiritual Search. I don't know if any of you have seen this McCrindle report. It's really worth seeing. One thing that is in it, one set of figures, 3 out of 4 Australians agree the church makes a positive difference in the local community. 3 out of 4. When we hear, oh, they're against us and we're victims and we're losing our rights, and 3 out of 4 Australians believe the church makes a positive difference in the local community. 9 out of 10 say we Christians should have, or religious people should have, freedom to share our religious beliefs if it's done in a peaceful way. We have a lot of people, Christians, I'm sorry to say, in our ear that we're all persecuted and we're victims and we're losing our rights and we're going to go to prison for saying a prayer. I often say to them, you know, if a Christian goes to prison, and I think there's a massive overreach of the state laws here in Victoria, I agree, it's a massive overreach. But if a Christian goes to prison for saying their prayers, that will be the best witness ever. Let's actually celebrate that. Jesus said the world will hate you. He didn't say the world will always like you and fight for your rights. He said the world will hate you. Why would we be surprised if there's some future persecution? I don't think we've got much at all. Another really helpful figure, 2 out of 3, McCrindle says Australians are likely to say yes to coming to church if invited by a friend. That's pretty exciting. 2 out of 3. As a challenge to your people, just invite a friend. Just try it yourself. That's what the research is saying. Well, in Australia's search for meaning, there's a lot of other stuff. I won't go through it all, but what we're seeing is that there's been an openness to faith during the pandemic like never before. During COVID-19, Australians are spending more time thinking about the meaning of life, 47%. Thinking about their own mortality, 47%. Thinking about God, 33%. Praying, 28%. Now, these are largely figures drawn from secular Australia, right? When we say, oh, it's all lost and they're all against us, McCrindle says, no, it's not. Wake up. Have a look at the openings and the opportunities. 57% of regular churchgoers strongly agree that they have taken on greater responsibility for their own spiritual growth during COVID-19. Now, if you ask what your job as a pastor is, wouldn't you answer it's to get my congregation taking on greater responsibility for their spiritual growth? We might be struggling, and they're real, for volunteers. We might be struggling to get some people back, but if McCrindle research is right, a whole lot of people actually have stepped up on discipleship and taking spiritual responsibility for their own, greater responsibility for their own spiritual growth. McCrindle says during COVID, there's been a profound shift from materialism to meaning. The silver lining of COVID-19 has been a reprioritization with many Australians. The focus has shifted from materialism and the accumulation of more to people and community. 4 in 5 Australians agree COVID-19 has clarified the relationships in which they want to invest their time, 79%. Has positively strengthened their family and household relationships, 79%. Aren't we on about strengthening the family? COVID-19 experience has also ushered in a return to local and a focus on the local community. Over half of Australians valuing a strong local community more than they did 3 years ago. Well, there's our entree, isn't it? This is what Neighbour is telling us. We're here for others, the message of Jesus, for this local community. 76% of Australians agree the churches in their local area are making a positive difference to their community. 76%. Let me finish, because you probably all know this, by saying I think the opportunities are great. I think Neighbour now gives us a platform to build on those opportunities. We always see the problems. We've got budget and volunteers and Sunday school teachers and rosters. I know, I've been a pastor for nearly 20 years. Look at the bigger picture. Look at these attitudes. Let's be open to this bigger picture. And let me return to where I started. I am really worried that there is some voices in the church wanting to emphasize fear and victimhood. I received an email, you probably got it the other day, I won't say the group, asking for funds, but saying we're all persecuted and we're going to go to jail for praying and the exorcism or gay conversion, and this is terrible. Give money. Firstly, I don't see fear being used to give money usually in the Bible. Secondly, we're amazingly blessed. One, these attitudes I've just said. Two, the fact that we have so many Christians from the Prime Minister in Parliament, disproportionately more Christians in Parliament, far more than secular people, way over the top. Thirdly, we have nearly over 30% of kids being educated in faith-based, largely Christian schools, Catholic and Protestant. You know, Britain has 7%. USA has 8%. We have, it's nearer to 35% actually in Victoria. When we say we're all persecuted and it's terrible, we've been given an extraordinary privilege, unlike other nations, in formation and Christian teaching. And yes, there will be at the edges some secular control saying, well, we're funding you to do this. That's not the same as persecution. Let's keep things in perspective here. Let's not become victimhood. I read Mark chapter 7, Mount of Transfiguration in my devotions this morning. And you know the story, I don't need to read it. And I thought, wow, this is the moment of glory for the three who are on the mount with Jesus. And it struck me, it's a moment of glory in the clothing. Their clothing is dazzling like white raiment. It's the moment of glory with company. There's Moses and Elijah. It's the moment of glory with light transfiguring the mountain. And it's the moment of glory when they hear God's voice. This is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased. But then what happens? They go down the mountain and it's only Jesus. And what does Jesus say? I must suffer and die to bring heaven on earth, kingdom of God wanting a relationship with us, represented in the temple in Hebrew thinking, in Jesus, in his body, the new temple, heaven on earth. His body is the temple. This is what it's about. In his death, bringing salvation that says, I'm overcoming all that stops God and humans having a relationship. That's what salvation means. And I thought about the cross, the clothing, not dazzling raiment. He's stripped of all his clothes. The company, not Moses and Elijah, but two thieves on either side. The light, it's not dazzling. The whole world at the cross is covered in darkness, Jerusalem. It is darkness. And not the voice of God saying this is the Son of God, a Roman soldier. A Roman soldier saying this is the Son of God. And I go, you know, we Christians, we like the glory. We like the triumph. We want to say we're being persecuted and we're dominant. We don't like the cross, do we? And yet it's in the cross that salvation, heaven and earth coming to meet, actually is overcoming sin and death and greed and evil is dealt with. Well, take this platform, stay united, and may God continue to help us do good works. Thank you.